I feel like there's a lot of guys who get stuck in the feeling of being left out, not knowing what to do with that. So could you speak to, like, what do you do in those seasons where you're feeling more left out? Because I hear you saying that you lead with a lot of vulnerability, but I would be interested to hear how that applies to that situation that I think a lot of men go through.
If you want better friendships, be that better friendship. So I'll text people and be like, hey, can you get lunch, coffee? You want to go hang out? You want to do something? How are you? I have a need. I want somebody to care for me, but I've learned that the answer is then to be a good friend to somebody else. Because what you find out is like, they probably felt very similar. And then they're like, oh man, I'm so glad you called. I'd love to hang out.
Welcome to 3%. We're your hosts, Jamie Haig.
And I'm Blake Roberts.
We're two best friends, fathers, husbands, and just two guys trying to figure it out.
We're also therapists, which is probably a pretty important part.
That's true.
And we believe that at our best, people are 97% honest with themselves and others. And it's that hidden 3% of emotions, needs, desires, and behaviors that we keep to ourselves that keep us bound to shame and loneliness, from which many of our issues stem.
Each week on this podcast, we'll interview leaders in the fields of psychology, theology, arts, and athletics to explore holistic masculinity. We're not here to tell you the man you need to be, but we are here to help you explore what gets in the way of being the man you want to be.
We're going to help you develop courage and give you the tools to share your 3% in the relationships that matter most, so you can more deeply connect with yourself, God, and others. So, pull up a chair.
Let's get into it.
So let's be honest. Let's be honest. Let's be honest.
All right, welcome back, everybody. You're going to need to buckle up today. We've got a really exciting guest. It's going to be a good one. We have Scott Erickson on today. You might know him as Scott the Painter, unless your handle has changed on your social medias. That's how I first discovered him. Scott is an artist, an author, performance speaker, and a creative who mixes autobiography, mythology, and aesthetics to create visual vocabulary for the spiritual journey and art that speaks to our deepest experiences. He does a lot of things. He's got one-man shows that he runs. He's got wall art. He's got a new deck of cards that I just saw, which is really exciting. Excavation cards, which I'm sure that'll come up at some point in our conversation. He's been working as an artist for over a decade. His work has been all over the place. And I would imagine more importantly, he is married to his wife, Holly, and has 3 kids, Anders, Elsa, and Jones. Most importantly, from my perspective, Scott is somebody who I've never met, but through my intake of his work and words online, he's somebody who really embodies vulnerability and honesty in the art that he creates and the words that he shares. So he's the perfect guest for 3%.
Yeah.
And we're really glad that he's taking time to hang out with us, and excited to see where this conversation goes. So that's the kind of highlights of what I know about you. And I know that you've got a story that has led you to that point. You haven't always been doing those things. And so as much as you want, what do you feel like is important for people to know about you? Because you're this public person that everybody, or that a lot of people have perceptions of from what we see that you put out in this curated digital landscape. But what don't we know about Scott?
What don't we know is that I'm racked with questions and unknowns, and am constantly, I think I was talking with a friend who's a very successful author and speaker yesterday, and we were just talking about I like to call it the haunting. The ability to really read people is what has made me successful, but it also makes me like not a great friend at times. And I was like, yeah, the thinker, listener part of me has allowed me to like make some great work, but also, you know, I don't know if later on my kids are going to be in therapy and they're going to be like, my dad was great, but often he was just standing to the side looking into space. Or I was on this retreat recently and I was talking to some people about just some things I've been working on lately. And they were like, so are you like a philosopher or something? I was like, no, you guys don't think this hard about everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's,
Have you always
those-
been that way? Have you always thought that deeply and that hard about things?
it's probably related to sometimes the pain of being alive that I feel. And so it necessitates the question of like, well, why am I doing all this? And what is this for? And why am I here? Why? I was talking to a friend last night of just like, look, in the sacred text that we grew up with, right in the middle is a whole book where the author is just like, by the way, it's all kind of meaningless. But there's some meaningful things too. And I was like, and I don't think we give enough grace to ourselves to go, it's totally okay if there are days where you're like, it feels really meaningless. Like that is maybe a normal feeling. I don't think that's the end of that. I got my feelings mug here. I don't think that's the end of that, but like, I think it's just like part of it. So then that necessitates all kinds of questions then of just like, well, why am I living the life I am living now? And what things are really important to me? And am I making time for those? And I'm getting close. I'm 47. So 50 isn't that far away, which 50 just seems like just like you're so old. And I know I have a lot more gray in my beard, but I don't feel old at all. My hips hurt a little bit more than they used to. And so I'm always like pushing myself like, well, if you got to be here, what is it you really like want to try to do or see or experience? Because I can feel the malaise of the responsibility that I'm in of parenthood and nonstop dishes and laundry and those things, those things can just like envelop me in the tidal wave of just like, is this it? It's just like managing lists and driving kids to school all day long. Like, that's kind of the whirlwind that I exist in. I don't know if that's clear at all, but yeah.
I can see why they asked if you were a philosopher. I mean, so many questions about like, why am I here? What is this for? And I don't know how old your kids are, Scott, but I have two. He has one kid. Mine are 3 and 6 months old, and his is 1.5.
Yeah.
And I know I can feel I love the word you used, the malaise of I'm washing bottles. And if I'm not washing bottles, I'm washing their clothes that they spilled the bottle on. And if I'm not washing their clothes, then I'm probably getting their stuff ready for school the next day. And if I'm not doing that, I'm probably preparing for something that's a few weeks down the road that I need to get ready for them. And life outside of work is mostly in service to that, which feels unending at times. And so that malaise, I think for a lot of people listening to this podcast, I hope that it's encouraging that you're not alone in that feeling. I feel like that's a really relatable, not just parenting feeling, but when you're doing something that feels all encompassing like that. Parenting is just such a specific, relatable place that it happens for a lot of men.
I think too, as my group of guys that I have, as we get older, what starts to come up is like the regret of, oh, I never was in a band, or I never did these things. I think that can lead to, in unhealthy ways, it can lead to, for me, it can lead to like drinking or whatever, trying to, unhealthy outlets of pleasure and sex and stuff, or just, that's not an admittance of unfaithfulness to my wife. Just saying, like, like it can lead to all kinds of numbing because we have this like thing that we wanted or wished we want to do. And so I'm constantly proposing to my group of friends, which is we actually were, nobody's really gone into all this, but we were like, we should make merit badges, and like everybody has to come up with a thing that we need to do. And so there's a big river here, and one guy wants to like swim across the river, and there turns out to be like there's actually a group of people that swim across the river every year. We're like, we should join that.
Wow.
But I'm like, we all talk about comedy, and I was like, why don't we do everybody write 5 minutes of comedy, and we'll just get together. I have this big studio space. I have a sound system. We'll set it up. We'll do it. Like, you've never been in a band and did a show. Well, are you malleable on the definition of what that looks like? Because you could definitely write some 1-minute songs and gather your friends and do a show and make up a band for the night. Like, things are doable. It's just like, you get this, and this is what a lot of my last show, Say Yes, was about, is we have this idea, this dream of what it's supposed to look like, but that dream has never involved our vulnerabilities, our weaknesses and limitations. And so the dream in our life often dies because it's some kind of invented ideal. And what you have is weaknesses and limitations. And your vulnerability is really your relationship to that. And I think the spiritual act is, instead of seeing it as in the way, it becomes the way. And so I'm always like, okay, I want to try to accomplish this. Well, whatever idea of perfection, that's not going to happen. It's going to come through my sometimes stuttering, my potentially a few days a week, the melancholiness that overwhelms me, but it's like, but that's what it has to go through to have its unique outlet. And so that, like, for me, that's the practice of the creator, is to go, well, it's going to come through these limitations. And it's actually a really helpful, here's like a secret to art making. It's actually helpful to give yourself limitations. Like, if you see a lot of my illustrations, there's not a lot of color in it. There's like black and gold, sometimes black and blue. Some things I have color. And people will be like, is that for any specific reason? And aesthetically, it's just, I like it. But it's also like, hey, it just makes it easier to go, you have 3 colors or you have 2 colors.
Yeah.
Because endless decisions of color schemes, I mean, there's so much color theory. So to simplify that decision allows me to go deeper on the form and shape of the illustration. So by giving myself a limitation, it helps me go deeper in something else. And that's in all kinds of creative outlets. By like giving yourself a limitation, it can lead to like go deeper on the thing that you want, which is like, for me, to portray like a deep truth through the simplest visual form. So I'm even like considering this year, I have been like, man, I don't know if I want to die without ever having tried to write a song.
Yeah.
Who's the lead singer of Wilco? Jeff Tweedy. He has a great book called Write One Song. It's very short. It's like a 2-hour audiobook. It's great. But he just kind of lays out his songwriting. And I have a friend who's like a Grammy award-winning musician guy. And he's like, you don't need to know how to play an instrument to write a song. He's like, you can have friends who can make music. But he was like, you should try to write, because he's like, your writing's very lyrical. But he was like, I would help you write some songs. So I was like, I should just take a few things that I've been thinking about and try to like kind of write them in a poetic form. And when I say like make a song, I'm talking about like, and no offense to the streets, but I'm talking about like some beats and a guy talking. Or lately I've been into LCD Sound System, and they're great. But that guy's not like, nobody's asking him to sing operatic music. Right. His beats are really fun. He's kind of singing, talking. It's great. It's great. Yeah. There's all kinds of outlets for it.
Yeah. Do you know the artist Propaganda?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Prop and I are good
that's
friends.
Like, you're good friends. That's okay. I had a vision of that was a possibility because of where you live, but I was like, I'll just ask.
Is he from that area?
I mean, Prop is, we were hanging out in LA, and I was like,
you called him Prop. You called him Propaganda.
His real name is Jason. His real name is Jason.
I'm sure he loves you saying that.
Everybody just call him Jason. But I think even his wife calls him Prop. So I like, I'll see him, like, hey, Jason. And he's like, okay.
Yeah.
No, but I was like, would you ever want to do something together? And he's like, absolutely. And I was like, yeah, that'd be really fun.
He's who came to mind immediately when you said, I want cool beats with somebody speaking over it.
I'm gonna make a Post-it note and put it right here. It says,
there
like,
you go.
Call
and
Prop.
You totally should do it. Jamie and I were, if people are listening to this and not watching, we just were looking at each other smiling, because we quick story. We went to a cabin.
Yes, dude.
When was this? You're good with dates.
It was 2022. So.
Okay, so we went to a cabin in 2022 because we're both therapists and we both wanted to. We're friends long before that, and we've always wanted to like do something, some sort of work together. And so we went to this cabin to plan out this like marketing agency business for therapists. Like that's what we'll do. We'll build websites, we'll help people with branding, all of that. And as we got into it, we just started to realize one of us named like, this is something that could be fun and we could be decent at, and maybe it could even make us some money, but it's not the dream. Like there's a deeper calling, there's a deeper dream in us, which is a lot more opaque and a lot more vague and scary because it's vulnerable. And long story short, that's where we didn't call it this at the time, but that's where the 3% as a thing was birthed. But part of that was we like scratched the whole let's plan something thing. And Jamie is a singer-songwriter. He was, he has a record out and did that before becoming a therapist. Amazing songwriter. And so he was like, I think it was your idea, maybe.
Jamie, you're living our dream. You're living our dream.
He was like, let's write a song.
A dream.
Yeah. I think you said maybe like, let's write a song or something.
Yeah, it's a go-to for me. I write songs instead of journaling.
Yeah.
And
that's great.
We were talking about, if you know about internal family systems, IFS, like parts work.
Yeah.
That's a lot of what I incorporate in my practice with clients. And so we were talking about that, and we just started, he was like, let's write a song. And I was like, I don't know how to write. I mean, I grew up playing drums, but I'm like, songwriting is one of those art forms to me that I'm like, that is like, you have to have that. I can't write a song. I'm not a songwriter. And we wrote a whole song, and it was a song written to the younger parts of us. And it was the most it was the coolest and most spiritual experience for me, not being a songwriter, but that similar thing of like, I think I can maybe do this, and having to reframe like, it doesn't need to sound good. It doesn't need to, like, we don't need to produce it. We don't need to try to sell it to somebody, but just letting it be that experience was so cool.
That's it. I mean, it's something different to then take your creative outlet and then try to make it pay your bills. That's a whole different aspect of what creativity should do for you. But as in the way of just like, I love this quote by Rick Rubin, who says, the producer with the long beard, he says, he's like, if you squeeze an orange juice is going to come out. If when you get squeezed, whatever's in you is what's going to come out of you. And he's not talking about a shark. He's saying like whatever, maybe later on you'll look back and be able to give context to what that is. But he's like, what you think about your life and existence is what's going to come out of you. And he goes, creativity and personal expression are the same thing. And he goes, I don't know if you can know what your story is until you've taken the time to tell it. And I think that's so important. I've been thinking about that a lot. And in fact, the next thing that I think I'm kind of leading to is like kind of guiding, not how to tell your story, but more about like the idea of taking your pain and turning it into something, which is a creative act, which is, I also think in my faith tradition, like the way of the Christ and the way of the wounded healer. But it is to go like, what happened to you? And then by taking the time to tell that story, how would you know what your story is until you've taken the time to tell it through song, poetry, art, even if you're just like a storytelling at the Moth or something like that. And then by telling it to others, then it becomes a vehicle for healing in other people's lives. And it is that satisfying feeling like, oh my gosh, it turned into something. My life turned into helping somebody else out. And that is, everybody should partake in that. It's a different thing than then go, and now I'm going to quit my job and pay my mortgage on that. That's like that's a whole different animal.
Yeah. Blake was kind in talking about my music, but ultimately that's what I found music had turned into for me. Like I defined what success was for me, and it never paid bills. I mean, maybe some very small bills.
Yeah.
But what it did for me, and what, speaking to your like poetic voice that you have, I was listening to you on a theology podcast, and Blake was telling me about this as well in your liturgy show, but the idea of excavating the prayer that's already going on within you, or the conversation, excavating the conversation that's already going on within you.
Yeah.
For me, that's what songwriting was. And so for me, my career in music was incredibly successful because it excavated a real part of my soul that was neglected and otherwise maybe wouldn't have come to the table.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. We're all listening to podcasts, but I just recently listened to one with Elizabeth Gilbert, who's a profound writer and stuff. And she had a book that she wrote that she had to like cancel and basically not put out. And she's like, it'll, hopefully have a long life, but it'll come out later time, because it's set in Russia. And a lot of people who are Ukrainian were like, I don't think this is the time to release a book set in Russia. And she was like, you're exactly right. But she was talking to her agent, and her agent's like, I'm so sorry that this is working out this way. And she was like, I love the 3 years that I worked on that book. Like, that was the gift. She's like, yeah, it's a bummer. But she's like, the gift was the making it. It was the working on it. And I think maybe what sets the artist apart from others is realizing, I was telling somebody recently, like, maybe I'm going to continue in this career for the rest of my life, or maybe I'll do some other things. But I was like, I dedicated myself to a practice, and that dedication is not going to go away. Because I've had times where I worked at a large nonprofit, or I worked at a design agency, but I still made a space in my garage to paint and to make things. And I feel tremendously lucky and grateful to be able to pay some bills with that now. I also have a wife who's really successful, so it's nice to have a sugar mama.
Yeah.
But like, it's more, just been paying attention, is like, I've dedicated to a practice. And that is the source from which other things come out. In fact, I have, sorry, here at my desk, I was talking to one of my best friends. We were like at a gym on treadmills together, and I was talking about stuff, and I was like, dude, I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. I just take dictation from the silence. And he goes, that's going to be your autobiography.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then I talked about that story, and
beautiful.
that somebody made this and sent it to me.
That's so
and take
cool.
dictation from this. It's like, yeah, my job a lot is to fabricate things, but it's a lot of walks, and it's a lot of solitude, and it's a lot of checking in and going, what would you have me participate in? And that is essentially the secret life of my practice, that then leads to the outlets that you are witness to.
That's so good. And I'll speak on behalf of everybody who's consumed your work, that I think what's so impactful about your work is that it's clear that you have the dedication to the practice, and that you're not making art for the sake of likes or money, but it's something that's coming out of this deep work within you. And I'm pretty sure I heard you say it on some podcast once, and it has always stuck with me in when I'm writing things, when I'm creating anything, is that what's most personal is what's universal. I think you said that. If you did,
Yeah,
it was really good.
I didn't make it up, but that's like
It's so good. And you're
tenet
talking
of
about,
creativity.
I'm really curious about this. I didn't think I would ask you about this, but it keeps coming back to me after you mentioned it earlier. We're talking about like creativity, and we're talking about story. And one thing it sounds like you have that is incredibly rare, and I'm saying that from people I know, and then also just a lot of the men that I work with, is a group of really deep male friendships. When you talk about making a dedication to your practice as an artist, it makes me think of the dedication to the practice of what we're trying to do with 3%, which is being honest. And that's why I feel so drawn to your work, is because you name things and call out things that everybody is thinking about and feeling, but have fears or worries about putting language to that. And so in light of like making a dedication to the practice of being honest, of being vulnerable, particularly with your guy friends, like that's the whole, this whole thing that we're doing came out of that practice in our friendship, and hearing you be almost 47, I think, and having that group of friends is so probably normal to you, but also rare. And it's sad that it's rare, but it's true. And so I'm just, I don't know if I have a specific question other than like, how did you guys
deep guy
do
friends?
it? How do you have deep guy friends? You know, like, yeah, because I think they're like, I talk with so many clients that have friends, that have acquaintances that, and they're in my office talking about how they long for a deeper relationship, but they just don't know where to go. And I'm always saying, like, you have the guy that you go play golf with, or the guy that you go play basketball with, and he probably has that same longing to have deeper friendship as you do, but nobody's talking about it. Somebody has to start talking about it. But I'm just curious, like, with careers and kids and all of these things, like how you all maintain those really intentional and deep friendships that go beyond just talking about, you know, the cliche things that guys talk about.
It's constantly something that at least some of us are always like asking questions about, because we definitely can get together and just quote comedians and talk about, I don't follow any sports, not surprised, but like they can talk about like what's going on with the Trailblazers or, you know, whatever. And then it can just be goofing around, which is great. It's great. But then, you know, it just shit happens. And our friend's dad died, and we were like, how can we be alongside you? You know, what do you need? And just like going, hey, every week, or we're going to just kind of check in on you. And then, you know, I had a bout of suicidal ideation, I think like a year ago. And I just said, hey, I just want to let you know, because I didn't tell anybody, but I was really low and really questioning about if I wanted to be around or not. And I'm not in that anymore, but I didn't tell anybody. And I just want to let you know that that was happening to me. And then they were like, oh gosh, okay. And we started going, hey, we're just like, hey, we can have a good time. We're really fun. But should we come up with like a safe word or something that if somebody, like when we are together, if somebody needs to talk about something, that it's totally okay to take the conversation and say, I actually need my friends right in this moment. We're just like honest about that.
Yeah.
Of just like, does anybody need to talk like about something? And then, you know, a few of the guys they're all pretty like sensitive and emotionally complex and articulate, and so we can have those. So last night we had a film shoot, a video shoot at our house for my wife's business that led to like a long dinner that led to everybody staying till 10 o'clock doing dishes, and it was great. But then our other friend, his wife's going out of town, so he's like, campfire at my house tomorrow night, which I don't know if I can do, but like you know, so we try to, and then like Friday night, we're having a Christmas tiki party and poker night. And our group is really good at throwing parties, and everybody's a good cook, and so we like to joke, it's better to hang out with your friends and have a shitty dinner party. So we are always like, we have a taco place that's nearby. And so our friends will be like, tacos tonight. And it just means like, let's just get tacos. Nobody has to clean the house. We'd rather hang out with you than like try to have an awesome dinner party.
That's so good.
So we try to like give grace to our experiences. Our kids are now getting older. When it was a lot of babies, it was complicated, but our kids are like 13, 14, 12. My kids are 13, 12, and 6. You know, everybody's kids are kind of in that range. So now with our houses and stuff, it's like, let's just come over and the kids will entertain themselves and we can hang out. And it's, you know, we have seasons. I'm not saying like at times people don't feel left out. People don't feel, you know, I definitely have moments where I'm like, you guys are closer friends than I am with you, and that makes me feel left out. Those feelings happen. But then, you know, probably like the friend I've spent the least time with, we went and had breakfast on Saturday morning, and we like talked about our dads, and we talked about our businesses, and we talked about therapy and coaching, and we just talked a lot of stuff, you know, and it was great. And I was like, man, get along really well. He's just more introverted, and there's like certain people in the group that can just take over everything. So it's kind of just that intentionality.
Like how, when you are feeling more left out, because this is probably where a lot of guys end up feeling stuck, especially if they're not as emotionally in tune or, as you described, sensitive or emotionally articulate I feel like there's a lot of guys who get stuck in the feeling of being left out, not knowing what to do with that. So could you speak to like how you, because we can talk about what we do all day, but we're both therapists. Like what do you do in those seasons where you're feeling more left out? Because I hear you saying that you lead with a lot of vulnerability, but I would be interested to hear how that applies to that situation that I think a lot of men go through.
This is a great question. How do I say this concisely? I have a brother that I haven't talked to in 10 years. He doesn't want to be a part of our family anymore. My wife's family is complicated. We don't have deep family relationships. And so I think it took a long time to realize this is like, we're really dedicated to our friendships because we're looking for them to fill a bit of our friendship or like that relationship in us. Whereas like some of our other friends have like big families and they're always doing stuff with their families. And we're so jealous of that.
Yeah.
So I say all that to say, I never feel like anybody is going to be as good of a friend to me as I'm going to be as a friend to them. That's just how I feel. I'm not saying that's true. I'm not saying that's like real and then we're testing that out. That's just how I feel, probably because of some past betrayals, broken relationships. I've been ghosted by some people and those really hurt. And it takes I'm not saying I'm humble. It takes humility to go, when I feel that way, I just go, the answer is not to be like, hide out and be like, why? I'm not going to come out until somebody calls me. Nobody's going to call me. Nobody cares about me. I go, you should try to be a good friend to somebody. If you want better friendships, be that better friendship. So I'll text people and be like, hey, can you get lunch, coffee? You want to go hang out? You want to do something? How are you? And that, I have a need. I want somebody to care for me, but I've learned that the answer is then to be a good friend to somebody else, because what you find out is like, they probably felt very similar. And then they're like, oh man, I'm so glad you called. I'd love to hang out. So I've like definitely friendship pursued other men who I'm like, I want to be friends with you.
Yeah.
So it's like dating other men, like just I want to like, let's go do something together. I'd like to be friends with you. And like, I have a good friend that I kind of knew in college. And then after college, we ended up in Seattle and I just thought he was so cool. And I was like, dude, would you ever get coffee together? He's like, yeah. And then we started this thing where we'd walk around Queen Anne Hill. We'd get coffee and we'd walk the whole hill. And we did it like every week. And we just had like our man walks. And it was awesome. And we're still really good friends from that. So I think the thing with men dynamics is you often need, in the cocktail of male friendships, you need a heavy dose of experience. Men really bond over experience. So we try to do things that have an activity with it. The group of guys I had that I was friends with in Austin, who I still hang out with, we would do these twice a year male field games and we called it sports balls. And we wear costumes. We play jock games the whole time. And we would do these like field games all day long and get really drunk in the process of it. I'm not a big drinker, but then we'd sober up and then it was like so fun.
Play.
Yeah, we just play and we just had fun and like be goofy. And I still go we do these mancations together. So we're going to go like canoe or river together. The guys here, we will go, what do we do recently? Well, we'll do like hiking trips. We'll do, I don't know. Lately, we're just so busy. It's just like campfires and hang out. And we have a good time talking and doing stuff. But yeah, I think having an activity that you can just sitting in a cafe being like, let's talk. That's tough if you don't have a lot of relationships. So it's like, let's do an activity. Right. Let's do something. And then I always if I'm just thinking of a question that I'm thinking about or want to ask, look, you say here, Jamie, you're a musician. Everything's a learned skill. Like songwriting is a learned skill. Painting is a learned skill. Everything's a learned skill. Being a friend is a learned skill.
That's right.
Having better conversations is a learned skill. I have in my notes app, I have a note on good questions to ask.
Nice.
Because sometimes I'm going to a social event, I'll be like, I don't want to like not have a question or be like, I don't know what to talk about. So I've collected some great questions and I'll I'm going to ask this question tonight at this party if I need to,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
just
That's so
like,
good.
hey, you feel like you're at a crossroads? Like, this is a good one I got from David Brooks, the author. He's just like, do you feel like you're at a crossroads in your life right now? Because most people do. And it's also a good segue to talk about Bones, Thugs, and Harmony. So, and then heaven and afterlife. So, and 90s hip hop. It's just like,
Yes, come
there's lots
on.
of outlets for that. So it's more about like, what do I want? I want to have deep male friendships. How am I going to get there? I'm going to get there by being the one who wants to create deep male friendships. If I'm just waiting for other people to do that for me, then, but here I know I can hear the rebuttal in some people, which is like, yeah, but nobody wants to hang out with me. Let's talk about that. What kind of expectation of the friends you think you need to have? Like, because when you say nobody wants to hang out with you, that's not true. But maybe there are certain people who are distant and busy and unaware. And the person who's like actually close to you that you'd be like, oh, we could hang out. Like there's a friend who isn't cool, is like, he has a blue collar job. He works really hard. He prepares for his family. He's really fun, but he's not cool. You know what I'm saying?
He's using air quotes for the audience.
He's not cool. He has he's not on social media. He's not, but he's a fun hang. And we I'm just like, he has to get up really early. So I was like, hey, I get up early too, just to do meditate. I was like, so, hey, do you want to meet for coffee and just like connect? Cause I was like, this guy's really fun.
Yeah.
And I'd like to like get to know him better. And now we see each other more often and he's fun. He's not in the worlds I'm in. When people say like, nobody wants to hang out with me, I'm like, I think nobody that you are like setting an expectation of hanging out, what it looks like, but there's all kinds of people around you that probably would love a friend. And this is another story. When my wife and I were really poor, which was most of our marriage, she nannied for these really wealthy doctors, and we actually got to be friends with them. And like the husband knew I had a lot of flexibility, so he'd be like, hey, I'm going to go or water skiing today. Can you drive the boat?
Nice.
So I did a lot of that. But this is not a judgment on them. They all hung out with other wealthy doctors. And so then all of their decisions, and here's what happens when you get older and you have friends who make different kinds of money. The rich friends are like, let's go on this trip together. And the other friends are like, I can't afford that trip. And I think that there's I want to make sure that in my life that I have a tier of different kinds of friendships so that I don't get stuck in one way of living. And that keeps, does that make sense? I'm not trying to sound like elitist, and I'm not in the high tier. I definitely have some really rich friends and I'm like, I can't go on that trip with you. I'm just saying, like, I think it's really helpful to have different kinds of friends and different kinds of industries, practices, lifestyles, that then it's like, it just keeps a more dynamic kind of experience in the world.
Yeah.
And the proximity. The proximity will also, Brian Loritz, a pastor in North Carolina, he'll often say, specifically about engaging with like race relations, he'll say proximity breeds empathy. So if you have those different tiers of friendships, or just like diverse friendships, then you're going to have empathy for ways of life that aren't your lens. I love that. I think that's super cool.
Yeah. And so that, I think, takes some intentionality. My wife and I have moved a lot. We have started over in new cities and try to build friendships, and it's tough. I get it. It really is. So I know there's things like Meetup, or, often I think churches are just, people are like, where can I meet a bunch of people? I'm going to go to church. Yeah. I mean, and I used to poo-hoo that. And now I'm like, no, why can't church be a social club? I mean, it kind of is, in the way of, we need interaction and we need community.
Yeah.
But every time I've moved, I've just had to go, you have this desire to be loved by others. So the invitation is to try to be a good friend to whoever you can meet, and start building really by trying to be their good friend. Yeah. And when I've done that, then it has led to that I meet their other communities and stuff like that. So
because when it's genuine, then it comes back. It comes back around to you.
Yeah.
And I love something that you said earlier when you were talking about the story of how you had that bout of suicidal ideation and your friends didn't know about it, and then you came back to them and said, I've been feeling this, and you talked about having a safe word. I love that idea.
Yeah.
So 3% as a brand started as a safe word for us.
Yeah.
It
Cool.
was like this realization that even when we're like, we met in 12-step recovery, and before that, maybe we were 50% honest with people, and we've shared this before, but then you get into 12-step recovery, and then you're like, holy shit, this is honest.
This is too much honesty.
And even in that, though, we started realizing we can be really honest. Maybe we're 97% honest with ourselves or with each other. A lot better than the 50%, but it's the 3% that really can keep us stuck. And so we just started using that. Like, once you understand the concept of the theory of 3%, and you go to a friend or even your spouse, like my wife will now be like, she'll ask me what's wrong, and I'll be like, nothing. And then she'll be like, what's the 3%? And I'm like, dang it, why are you using this against me?
About this?
Oh, that's nice. That's good.
But it's a good safe word, because when you know what it means, and I say, hey, I need to share my 3% with you, it's like, what I'm saying is, what I'm about to say is vulnerable. What I'm about to say is hard. It's scary. I don't really want to, but I want to because I want to connect with you. I need you to listen.
Yes.
I need you to put your defenses down. Like, this is really important. It says all of those things, and I need to share my 3% with you. When you have something like that with your friends and you both know what it means, it can just take you to that deeper place so much quicker and save a lot of time and even a lot of heartache of time spent trying to figure out how to talk about whatever the thing is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we've had conversations like, the point of us being friends is that I don't know if the percentage is like, yeah, sure, 97% of the time it's really fun, but what do we do with these like 3% of our lives? Like, of course we're the ones to share it to. That's why we have friendship. That's an ongoing conversation. I'm not saying we do it all well. You know, there are times when one person might take over the conversation and we're like, my God, if we have to hear them talk about that again, you know, like,
yeah,
it's
totally.
not
does
perfect.
That all the time.
It's not perfect, but it is more of just like we're all going through stuff.
Yeah.
We should how can we just make a space for those of us who are like, I really need to talk about this with you. And we could go, great. Yeah, let's do it. That's it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
And what I hope people will hear from listening to you talk about it, because I think it's so key, is that you were kind of alluding to how your vulnerability is what encouraged the vulnerability in others. Yeah. That, like you said, everybody could be feeling the same thing and hoping somebody will call them. And in the same way, even if you're hanging out, there's a saying in 12-step of what we feel on the inside doesn't match what we see on the outside of other people. And so, like, everybody could be hoping that someone else will share something vulnerable so that they have the encouragement to say the vulnerable thing themselves. But if you can just go into these friendships knowing, like, man, everybody's hoping for that, and you have the opportunity to bring freedom to your friend group through the initiating vulnerability. Like you said, you do it imperfectly, but yeah, like, it is imperfect, but you're also doing it. And I think what we are seeing in a lot of the guys we meet with is loneliness stemming from not imperfect friendships, but lack of them, lack of wanting to take the step of vulnerability that I'm going to have to let you in for this to have meaning. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're a society that is choosing to not trust one another. I don't know if you've read Sebastian Junger's Tribes. It's a 3-hour audiobook on Spotify if you have Spotify Premium. It's kind of not all male relationships, but it's just like, it's about like the disintegration of having to need one another. And I listened to this podcast about like loneliness and how people are spending less time together over the last 10 years. And one of the great takeaways was this kind of like intentional interdependence. Like, now it's like, hey, John's got a truck. It's like, I'll just go rent a truck. Or Mike knows how to like fix this. I'll just look up a YouTube video. Like, because of all this information and technology, we don't really need each other anymore. But the great thing about needing one another, that is how we are as beings, is we want that connection. And so we have said like, hey, I know you can go rent a truck. But it's like, if anybody, we're just like, how can we intentionally be interdependent on each other?
That's awesome.
Because that is going to fulfill a deeper thing with us. And that goes against this whole like rugged individualism that our culture keeps progressing. I don't know. You guys are having more like on the field experience with men in relationships that have to know about it. But I've just always, for me, I think the greatest treasure of life is friendship.
Yeah.
And I actually did this talk at a group called Plywood Presents in Atlanta, which was like, it was to a bunch of business leaders, and they brought me in to be like the heart at the beginning. And I was like, my whole speech was like, why it's lonely at the top is because what you expect to find at the top is connection. And you won't find friendship at the top, but you can bring friendship to the top.
Yeah.
And bringing friendship to the top will change how you're a leader.
Yeah.
And I talked about the practice of trying to be a friend could actually help you be a better leader.
That's good.
Because I was privy to this story where this, like, I was up in the San Juan Islands, and there was this man who's retired, very, very wealthy, and a group of us there. And we were looking at the harbor, and there was this like huge yacht with just like one person, this like older guy there. And then below it was this Zodiac filled with like way too many people just hooting and hollering and having like the best time.
Wow.
And
what
you
a
could
picture.
see this guy all by himself was just like kept looking at them. And this older, retired, really wealthy guy was like, you know how much that boat cost that guy? And we were like, I don't know, 5 million, 10 million. He goes, everything. That boat cost everything. And then visually, I had like all of these luxury items. And I was like, you know why people have these luxury items is because eventually they want somebody to be on their boat with them, come over to their house, ride in the car with them, go on a trip with them. It's like that just stuff has no meaning unless there's people around it. And yet what we're told is wealth and power, it should lead to more stuff instead of more relationships.
Yeah.
And not to get really dark, but listen to this interview of a guy who worked on super yachts, and he's just like, all these rich people want is just sex.
Yeah.
It's like
Connection.
you get them on these boats, and then they're just like, they want intimacy.
Yep.
Yeah.
In a gross outlet of it. But at the heart of it is just like, what I want from all of this is just somebody to be close
Connect
to
with.
and love. And so it's just like, I just understand that about myself. So I pay a lot of rent for this space. Probably it's way more than I need, but all my friends have keys. And one of my
really
best friends
sweet.
lives 3 blocks away, and he comes and he uses it all the time. And I was like, I want to spend my money on a place where I could gather people, where
That's
my friends could
beautiful.
come and hang out. That's what I would like to spend my money on. And it's really fun to have a big space too.
Yeah.
But it's not fun if it's just me here all by myself every day.
Right. Right.
You know, like,
Yeah, Scott, you're
like,
voicing
that's
a
what-
big dream for us too. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, so I'm trying to live into it, and I hope it continues more and more. But anyways, I'm convinced, I'm like, that friendship is what we all really want. So why don't we just align our lives to invest in that versus toys?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
sure. It's great to have friends with a boat,
Sure.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not
Sure.
saying like, don't get a
But
boat.
it's better. But
It's better to have a friend. It's better to have a friend with a boat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But I'd rather have a friend that I could say, "Hey, I'm feeling really lonely right now," and he can hold space for that. Than if I had to choose that over a friend that has a boat that I can go skiing on, I would choose the friend that I could say I'm lonely with. And interdependence, you're talking about that. Like interdependence with friends is really hard because for me to be interdependent on Jamie, on my wife, on anybody, I have to know, I have to be aware of, and I have to be working through the ways that being interdependent when I was a little boy resulted in some sort of harm. Like that's why it's hard to be interdependent on people, because
Absolutely.
people are flawed and our family systems are human, and some of them were really bad, and it caused a lot of pain.
At a certain point of vulnerability, somebody took advantage of you.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have that in my story too. My last show, Say Yes, it wasn't about suicide exactly, but it was.
Mm-hmm.
And what I know to be true is that people would rather kill themselves than go, I need help.
Yep.
Do you know what I'm
That's my
saying?
story.
It's scarier to say to your friends, I can't do this anymore and I need somebody to care for me, than it is to just kill yourself.
Yeah, totally.
That is,
Yeah.
and when I understood that about myself, I was like, oh, Jesus,
Yeah.
help me, Jesus. Like,
Literally.
oh,
It
okay.
was Blake's story too. He was
Yeah.
your
Yeah,
your liturgy really resonated, especially with Blake.
Yeah, I survived a suicide attempt in high school, and so I was,
Yeah.
just bawling my eyes out, trying to get ready as I'm listening to your Say Yes liturgy on YouTube, and I'm like, I'm just trying to put my jeans on.
That's so,
But you're right.
like,
You're so right.
suicide is like I was on somebody else's podcast and I was like, a friend of mine killed herself and she never told us that she was thinking about that. And we're just like, if she would have said, I'm not doing well, we would have been like, oh my gosh, let us love
Yeah.
you. Let us walk
Yeah.
with you. But it's
Yeah.
a secret conversation. And so why I made Say Yes, it was like, I just want to normalize that. Is
Mhm.
the first step is to normalize the secret conversation and to go, it's okay if you're thinking these things.
Hmm.
So many of us don't feel like you're left out because you're thinking these things. Like it's
Yeah.
just
Good,
starting
Scott.
with like, where did this come from? This says like, we should live a life where we're just like never need anybody else to help us.
Mhm.
And it is a real move of vulnerability. And I agree. It's not easy. I may be more like emotionally mature and dynamic, but it is hard to still go like, I'm not doing well today and I could use
Yeah.
some help.
Yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
big ask, but everybody steps in when you
Yeah.
ask. Nobody's been like, sorry, I've got
Yeah.
taxes due, or like,
Right.
I got to get this,
Right.
And if they
I got to
are,
get this
not
Substack
the-
out.
and
Yeah.
if they are, that's not the person you need to be asking for help from.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Gosh, we could keep going for hours.
Yeah, because we didn't even get into the conversation about like the harm that we were talking about in our stories, how that impacts who you are now, especially like church harm. I listened to you talking about that on other podcasts, and like that's a huge part of my story. So what I'm hearing is that we just need to ask you to come
Part
back
two.
at some point.
Yeah,
And
let's
when
do it.
there's some, I feel like when we go back and listen to all these once they're like out, I think every guest so far at the end we've said we need to have a part
Yeah,
two.
we have, yeah.
Just because this, I mean, I think it speaks to maybe our curiosity, but also just like how necessary these kind of conversations are.
And the
So,
generosity
Totally.
of our guests
Yeah,
that just
100%,
speak so vulnerably.
100%. And so
Totally. Yeah.
grateful for you, for your life and
Mhm.
the work that you're doing on yourself and how and what it's creating.
And the life it's encouraging in other people.
Yeah, the life that it's probably saving in other people.
Yeah.
Also, so little.
That's a nice encouragement today. Thank you. I do
Yeah.
spend a lot of time by myself, and
Yeah.
it's sometimes I'm like, does this go anywhere? Is it,
Yeah.
just so
Yeah.
when
Well, it definitely
it's
does.
amazing. Like if anybody you like, if you're thinking about emailing them, encouraging them, we should always do it. Cause I am utterly like floored when I receive an email and somebody's like, I just want to let you know that you mean a lot to me. Your work means
Yeah.
a lot to me and it really
Yeah.
helped me.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
it. And I'm just
Yep.
like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I needed to hear that
Yes.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And so it does mean a lot, and I know it'll mean a lot to our listeners, and we'll have all the links in the show notes and all the things, but you do provide a lot of practical resources to help people take the step of asking for help. We've mentioned a number of times your Say Yes liturgy you have on YouTube, books. I mean, I know they can go to your website.
You've only seen it on YouTube. You didn't get to come when it was in
I
Nashville
didn't get
last
to
time.
come to a person, to a live show. No, I'm really sad about that. I have some friends that did, and they had nothing but great things to say about it.
That's fun. It was last time I was in Nashville was at the Belmont, which is really fun.
Sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's so
it was
sweet.
really cool. I'd like to come back to Nashville again with
Please do.
Let us
something
know.
different, but I will.
Yeah.
I actually, I did have a question because I was just in Nashville really briefly in and out of the airport because I went to a place called Onsite.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I heard you on their podcast too.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
But I
that's
went 2 weeks ago
Nice.
because in September, I was like, I'm not good and I need to go back to therapy.
Did you do the Living Center program or which one?
I did.
Okay.
I have my on-site water bottle right here.
Yeah, dude,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah, I did the Living Center program, and
Yeah,
we're not
that's
supposed to really talk about it for like 30 days, and I haven't. I talked about it a bit. I met with my spiritual director yesterday, and I told him a bit, and I cried. I cried more than I've ever cried in my life, and laughed. I had like so much fun, but
Yeah.
I did the deep work, and I got healed from some stuff, and
Yeah.
Awesome.
it was one of the best experiences I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, I haven't been to
I
the
wish every-
campus. I have a friend, Matt, who is one of the guest lecturers there, and we went through grad school together. He'll probably be on at some
Cool.
point. But I know a lot of people.
Yeah, we have a lot of pals who work there.
have worked there or have gone through there, and it's a phenomenal place.
Yeah, and I know that it's pricey, and I was lucky enough to receive a scholarship, and then some friends behind my back put together
Yeah.
the funds for me to go, which
So
was
cool.
amazing.
amazing.
Speaks again to your
Uh,
friendship.
Yeah, that really, it really touched me. Everybody should do some therapy, and everybody
Yeah.
should get in a men's group, not a Bible study men's group, just like a
Yeah.
group of men
Yeah.
who
Well, that's what we hope
intentionally.
to create
Yeah.
with
We're gonna-
percent eventually is
Yeah.
10% groups.
Yeah, it'll be
Um,
some.
That's our part
some
too, is because like
combination.
how Bible. I mean, I get Bible studies are fine, but like it is interesting. Like it's not all bad, because some really good stuff. The church has offered some really good things, but then the kind of manipulation of relationships through ancient texts, predicated on like male relationships, is just
Oh, man,
there's
I
so
have
much. I could
to
tell you
say
some
about
Mars
that.
Hill,
Yeah, he could
Mars
say a lot
Hill,
about that.
Seattle stories.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well, we're trying to.
He was used in my spiritual abuse.
Yeah.
Marky Driscoll.
Okay.
But I
My
do
gosh.
want to.
What a great wrap up to the show.
I
Let's
do-
just drop that in there.
just a bomb for everybody listening. I do want to say specifically, because it's come up as a theme a few times, and I don't think we've said this directly to everybody listening. We have two people on the show right now who have had battles with suicidal ideation and suicide attempts, and both of you are saying that the truth that is hard to see when you are in that place is that people want to show up for you when you are honest about what's going on with you. And so as
Yes.
just kind of a call to action to the people listening who are in that same place, share it with somebody, because we all, myself included, Blake included, Scott included, we all want to show up for you if that's where you are.
Very
Send
well
me a
said.
DM on Instagram. I will answer. I answer every DM. If you're just like, I don't know you, but I'll just share to a stranger, and I'll be
Yeah.
like, I will listen
Yeah.
to you. Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely. I'll send you an
Yeah.
audio message. We'll talk. We can talk. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. People want to show up for you. It's the same. We're all busy, but the moment somebody's like, I need help, people will go, I'll help you. It's just that we don't know what's inside. That's the thing. That's the thing
Yeah.
we're missing. Is like we didn't know
Yeah.
that was inside. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt,
Thank
Jamie.
you, Scott.
I think what you're saying is great.
You didn't interrupt.
It's great being
Thank
with you.
you.
Let's
Yeah.
don't tease me. Let's follow through. Well, I'll do part 2.
Oh,
That's awesome.
I do
And
want to
maybe
talk
you'll-
about
lots of ideas already.
church stuff and yeah.
And maybe
I
you'll
like that
have
we
the
haven't talked
song
about
that you
art
made
at
with
all.
Prop.
That's great.
I know we haven't
I know.
talked about art, and he's a photographer. I'm a musician. But there's so much
Man.
art in this, and we didn't really talk about it. So part 3.
Well, I started writing
should-
down my song list of things that I was like, oh yeah, I
Let's
do want to make a
go.
song
Come
about
on.
that. A song about that.
Oh. Let's
So-
go. All right. Well, we'll just say to be continued then
Yeah.
to our new friend.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you, Scott.
It's great. It's fun being together. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we always end with
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I
we'll-
almost forget.
yeah. Blake forgets when he's hosting, which is fine. This
I
is
also
new.
I just really have to pee.
Keep
so
it
I'm not
okay.
fully-
Keep it crispy.
I have
We-
to pee, so I'm not fully present.
Okay. We
That's totally
always say
true.
to everybody something that we kind of gleaned from 12 Step and changed a little bit, which is we're glad you're here. Keep coming back. You're worth it.
So let's be honest,